I'm Shawn Aker. I'm a solutions architect, principal technologist here at Boomi, and happy to talk, and we're gonna get into it. I'm a storyteller. I have a bunch of stuff at the end if you want to learn more about some of the AI pieces, but we're gonna dig a little bit into that. So, all right, time to reach 100 million users. So, I'm sure some of you have seen this trend, but ChatGPT did it in 2 months, as opposed to all of the other technologies. And some of that is because of social media and some of the other technologies, but it's here, it's trending, right? And it's happened. And so we're gonna talk a little about that. But what is the practicality of it, right? So really what it comes down to is, the hype is huge, but Gen AI is just now starting to get into production. So you can see here, that it's kind of a little fuzzy, but you can see here that only 4%, are actually or have actually implemented generative AI, right? It's very, very new, and organizations most want to implement or evaluating how to use it inside of their organizations, but it's coming, and that's essentially how we're using this generative AI to make that happen. So. But the practicality is, 95%. So only 4% have implemented, but 95% think it will boost productivity, right? So, how do we get to this practicality? And what do we do with kind of this constant change that's coming with us? But so hype versus adoption, and I think that's important to talk about here, is really that focused phase, right? Where we're focusing on the hype. And you can see kind of the time frames here. Really, what's happened is that this last phase is where we are, is it's becoming increasingly cheaper and more efficient, and it's really exploding as part of that concept. So again, we don't have to talk too much about that, but it's this hype cycle, which is pretty common when new technologies come out. We have to have different ways to really drive how this adoption works as part of our enterprise. So that's the AI story, but what it's about is outcomes. So I'm gonna talk a little about that. Where does this come from? How do we do this? So it's truly about outcomes. And so this starts with a Chinese immigrant who created a hackathon essentially in about 2012, right? Her name is Fei Li. She ran a contest, right? She calls it a contest, but to me it was a hackathon. Right, and she wanted to create, and basically what she did is she spent 3 to 4 years. She's a Stanford University professor, and she decided to create a data set, an outcome. Right, she wanted to create an outcome that she could then take and build something as part of that outcome, so that we could evaluate, just to determine what she called computer vision, later called ImageNet, but essentially take images and match them into categories. Right, so she took 3 or 4 years building this data set and essentially creating an outcome that they could test. So it was a huge data set. It was, some astronomical number of data points that they had to test. And a bunch of these universities came in and built this together. So again, Fei Li is her name, super interesting. So in 2012, there was a couple of iterations of this contest and, lots of pieces there, but what happened was there was something called, one of the people in this hackathon got results that were 20-30% differential on that. And it's called AlexNet, which is, again, they were able to get these numbers that much better because they had determined the outcome. And what they did is they took a 1980s algorithm and put it on top of something called a GPU, right, which is a graphics processing unit. That was in 2012. And all of a sudden, everybody took notice. And that is what has really driven this. And of course, last week, NVIDIA is the second largest company on the planet because of this type of, really, in my opinion, this was one of the quintessential pieces of that piece. But to me, it's all about those outcomes. And really, the reason I'm bringing this up is because who's heard the term RAG? Has anyone heard that term? That's a year old, right? That came from a paper as part of it, and really think of it as a consciousness. That's what a RAG is. And generative AI is essentially, when you're trying to describe it, it's a calculator for words, right? That's what generative AI does. It helps to kind of create these kind of combinations of words. But really, what makes the RAG is this consciousness, is it helps to kind of evaluate. And I really what it is it's technology mimicking, and you can see from my slide, right, is to simulate human intelligence. What we're doing with these large language models and neural networks, right, is copying nature, the stuff that already exists. So if you look at your human brain, you have 11 million bytes a second you're processing. About 10 million of that is vision, 500,000 is audio, and the rest is sight or touch and taste. But so it's 11 million bytes per second that your brain brings in, and you can only process 50. So out of the 11 million bytes, you can process 50. And that is done through a conscious. Like you have and by the way, that's of course means that all of us kind of see things differently. We see that 50 things, those 50 bytes differently, which is, we can dig into kind of why that's important. But really what RAG does is it's that consciousness to it. And it's driving kind of, as the data comes in, what do we do with it, and how do we design it for outcomes? And what I'll say is, in 3 years, this is all going to be obsolete, right? As I said, 1 year ago, RAG was in existence. So we have to have outcomes, not technology. If we continue to think that we can, build the best pipelines and code our way through all these problems, it's just going to be outdated in 6 to 12 months, because new technology continues and grows and builds. And so what we need to do is build technology that's very adaptable and is no code and comes up with ways to build these pipelines in days and weeks and not months and years. And so that's really what it's about. We have to have these outcomes. It has to be outcome driven. So what can we do to help, right? Or what can you do to help kind of deal with these kind of orchestration problems, right, when it comes to AI? And really, what an orchestration framework is are templates that help us put together complex and useful outcomes, right? Again, focusing on the outcomes, just like Fei Li did. She had an outcome of a data set. She came back with, we have to have useful outcomes, because again, it just keeps changing, right? We have to deal with that. So one of the things, from a technology perspective, it's not just about, I don't know, has anybody heard the term Agent Garden? It's pretty new. Yeah, brand new set of tech. The business journals are starting to write about it. OpenAI has built a bunch of technology around it. Boomi has patented agent technology, which helps capture this information to build, again, because once we have the agents where they need to be, we can funnel that information and pipe it. So think of the plumbing, right? And pump it into our large language models, into our technologies. And of course, we've partnered with a number of folks also to capture fintech data, other types of data and we're going to continue to grow that. And just like the garden implies in the agent part is that it becomes its own little ecosystem. So as we place these agents wherever your data is, we can then automatically pull that data in and get the data into your models or wherever it needs to be. So it's designed in a way to, again, be centrally managed, but still have the agents wherever they need to be, which is where your assets are. All right, so this is a little bit busy a slide. This is where we think we can help, right? Is, again, helping to orchestrate these pieces. In a typical AI build out, you're going to have vector databases, and we can talk about that, or visualizations. But we're going to help you drive that data to those different places, like say event-driven technology, or pulling. Because right there on your left is your application, right? From the data pieces all the way down to the OS. And what we're doing is we're taking that information and we're feeding it and pulling it into the models, whether that's to your lakes or wherever it needs to be. But again, in a way that's no code and is designed to just be easy to use and easy to deploy. So again, if we're trying to get to outcomes, I always say this, right, is the value there's really three things that if we're trying to design for outcomes. It's either we're trying to make money, we're trying to save money, or we don't want to go to jail, right? That's security. Always, that's kind of those are how we design these outcomes as part of this application. And really that's, how we build those things out in a way that, how do we scale it? And again, when the technology changes, which it does, the stack will continue to move around. How do we, deal with the pipelines as they are constantly moving around? Anyway, so again, dealing with complex processing or dealing with new applications, the average enterprise, for example, has about 300, 400 applications in it. And they're constantly changing. And so for us to deal with these kinds of data issues, we need to be able to access those and do it in a way that's agnostic so that, instead of reinventing the wheel and trying to connect to all 400 of those applications, we have kind of done that for you already, right? And there's technology out there that makes that possible in order to orchestrate those pieces. And again, there's really good open source technology there, but I think the value we bring to the table is that we have those relationships and we continue to build it, and we continue to drive, that support, those scale models, really being able to make it so that, and what I would say is, instead of just saying, I'm just going to build that Python Spark build outs or some other type of technology, turn to some of those low code, whether it's Boomi or not. But I think Boomi is the best at what we do. But find a low code way to build these pipelines so that you can get your data where it needs to be and get to those outcomes faster. Because I've been talking on the floor today, and almost every single person is 6 months behind building out pipelines to get data where it needs to be. Why is that? Right? Because it's hard. Because you don't think about, I'll just connect this API and then you go, well, what happens when it breaks? And how do I do the error handling? And what happens when the data changes in 6 months? And and then it breaks, and all of a sudden my report's wrong and my data's wrong, and then no one's looking at the report because the data's wrong, and so it's a waste of time. So we have to have this kind of, quick, agile way to deal with the data change. All right. So again, outcomes now. Here's some examples. I love examples. There's 20 others, but how can we help identify risk? Chatbots. I think that's a big, huge aspect to what some of the things we can do. Maybe it's onboarding. I mean, how much time are our folks spending onboarding and offboarding between all the different technologies? I think that's a pretty common problem. Order to cash, right? I mean, how do we deal with those types of processes, and how do we automate those types of things? How do we predict maybe when things are happening? Again, if I'm feeding this data to the AI models, it can help provide you with real answers to problems if you have the right data. So also it's, what can we do to, for scheduling and routing? I think optimizing those parts, again, with data, because it takes quite a bit of data to make those things happen. And, again, these are some of the examples that we've been able to do. One of the things that we've been doing recently is being able to feed some of this error handling into the GPT-4 models, so that instead of just getting random errors that your applications create, we can get nice, user-friendly errors that'll drive you to actually implement, easy to use ways to deal with these errors. And so you can give those to non-technical users. Another thing I'll talk about too, as part of these outcomes, is democratization, right? So what we can do is we can take our technology and give it to anybody. So they can set up like a little walled garden, right? So they have their own set of technology where they can go in and build those pipelines themselves. And then they can take that and build their own build outs, but you still have the governance, right? Because otherwise they're just going to go buy something, right? They're going to do their job. And if they buy just random products, then you have no control. It's hard to maintain the costs. You have no governance as to how you integrate those applications. So it's a huge deal to really be able to democratize, is what Gartner calls it, to democratize that data and really make it so that you can take the folks that really know their process and make it so they can build their own pipelines to build these integrations. Or maybe you help build it, and then, as from a developer standpoint, you build those pipelines, but then you give them the maintenance of it. Because that's one of the biggest problems, right? You build these incredible applications and nobody understands them but you, and then they just become technical debt for your organization as things change or you get promoted or whatever, right? So it's what can we do to really democratize how we build those pieces out? And that's why it's so important in a no-code, easy to use, easy to deploy environment, so that we can really drive that, build outs. Something I always talk about. I'm a big Costco fan. You'll catch me at Costco just about every week. It's one of my requirements. I have to live 5 minutes from a Costco, right? So I noticed they still use green screens. I don't know if you've seen that. They use green screens still. And the reason they do is because the data's not in the right spot. So you're going to spend 15 million, I don't know how many millions of dollars they spent on SAP 20 years ago. And the reason they still use the AS400 because that's where the data is. And they got to do their job. So it's so critical. And it's just hard to get that data in and out. And really that's what I'm able to do is in days and weeks, we're able to build those kinds of integrations as opposed to months and years. And so that's what I would say is, how can we help you do that? Or, what technology can you use to help really drive AI into this process to make it better? And one thing I'll note, we can help you in this AI journey as a trusted advisor, where we come in as, free of charge. We come in and actually help guide you through this process. It's called our AI workshop. So of course we use AI in the product, but what this is actually a workshop where we come in, help you assess how can we use AI as part of those outcomes, kind of teach you about what other companies are doing to help really generate that. And we do that as a service in hopes that at some point, you'll leverage us to help you orchestrate it and provide you value. So that it's a huge deal. It's a couple of 3 hours. It's really based on line of business, and it's been super successful. We've had a lot of folks that have been interested in it. Of course, for my last slide, kind of a call to action is to get ready. It's coming, right? And here's a bunch of samples that I put out there that kind of walk you through some of the books, and there's a lot of good podcasts too. Happy to give you more detail on those things, but again, what can we really do to help drive that orchestration and come up with ways? One of the things too Boomi's been doing recently is, as part of that AI orchestration, is building kind of and you can come back to the booth and we can talk about it, is building in that RAG where maybe you try one large language model, and if it doesn't get the results you're looking for, it can go to 2 or 3 or 4 different other types. Maybe it's for a part number or something specific as part of a chatbot process. So it really providing you with this orchestration to really drive that next level adoption as part of a chatbot. So I just was with Cox, and so I don't know, Cox is like an internet provider. They have a chatbot. It literally does nothing, right? I don't know about you, I am happy to use a chatbot if it does what I want it to. So if we can design chatbots that actually do things that we want to do, I think that's some type of orchestration framework under the covers is going to help make that happen. And so again, some of the things that I think an outcome we can actually get to that will actually save time. So, all right. Thanks, everybody.